This is the Mobile Home Park Lawyer Podcast with Ferd Neiman. If you're looking to generate wealth and passive income in the lucrative world of mobile home parks, you're in the right place. You'll discover solutions to the common legal and operational pitfalls and how to optimize parks to maximize income. Your host is in the trenches. He's a real estate attorney, financial analyst, and mobile home park investor and operator. Now, let's turn it over to Ferd Neiman.
Welcome back, Mobile Home Park Nation. Ferd Neiman here again today with another episode of the Mobile Home Park Lawyer Podcast. Another great guest today. This one's an interesting one. He's not one of my bread and butter mobile home park owner operators. He's even more. He's the founding president of ROC USA. ROC USA. That's RUC USA. Please help me welcome my guest, Paul Bradley. Paul, thanks for coming on, man.
Thank you so much, Ferd. Appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I'm excited to hear more of your story, and for our audience to hear your story, because you've got a unique one, and you've got a little niche here in the MHP world that not many other people are playing in that space in the same way you are. So tell us a little bit about more your background, and then we'll get into how you got into MHP and how you got involved with ROC and what you guys do.
Well, I first stepped into a mobile home park as a young professional at the ripe age of 24, and it was 1988. Began working for an organization in New Hampshire called the New Hampshire Community Loan Fund, and was helping homeowners purchase their communities as co-ops. Really, since the age of 24, it's something I've been extremely passionate about. And as you can see from my image, I'm a lot older than that today.
Well, great. Well, tell us more. So have you been doing that ever since? I know, because that sounds very similar to what you do now at ROC. Tell me how you went from that job and then into what you have built today. And I want to just hear more about, the size and scale you guys have. I follow you guys on social media, so I know you're having a big impact all over the country, but maybe tell us how that leap from where you were to now where you are today.
Yeah. So when I joined in 1988, we had just 9 co-op communities in New Hampshire. And over the course of whatever it was, 20 years or so, we grew that to 88 communities that were resident owned in New Hampshire. At the time, about 22% market share. And, I went from a young staffer to vice president of the Community Loan Fund. I had expanded into new development. We developed a 44-site community, also developed a 9-site community during that time. Also added a housing finance program to finance homes in these resident-owned communities. And so really had a sort of a trifecta, all the key elements that one needs to be successful, or really to help co-ops be successful, right? Help them buy their communities and support them through their ownership phase, provide access to single family financing, or chattel financing as people in the industry would refer to it, and access to new homes for both infill and community expansion. And really operated that through 2008. And it was earlier in the year, 2004-05, I began looking at, well, how would we scale the resident ownership piece across the country? Did a little stint at Harvard and launched ROC USA in May of 2008, 4 months before, President Bush was on TV talking about world financial systems collapse. And we've been on the path ever since.
Wow. Interesting. So how many communities, I want to talk about how many you have, but you're involved with, but also maybe for our audience, maybe explain a little bit more about the difference between, regular mobile home parks. I think we all kind of get, if I own the park and you guys either own your house and then you pay me lot rent, or I own the house and you pay home rent, which has lot rent built in. That's kind of the normal space. And then like in my house, where I sit, there's an HOA. So there's bylaws or covenants, easements, restrictions that run with the land, run with the title. So for example, I can't have 2 sheds in my yard. I can have 1 shed. I can't park a boat in my driveway for more than 24 hours. Rules like that. Similar rules are in the leasing guidelines or rules and regs in a regular mobile home park. In your case, with the co-op, explain those differences, how people actually have the ownership. And then I know we're going to get into a lot, and I know what you guys do is how do they have the leadership and just the managerial acumen to run a community, and or do they do it themselves? Do they outsource it? And what's your role in all of that in your organization? So that's what I'd really like to get a
Great.
better understanding of. And then also we'll talk about how you guys pitch it to your audience, and how these things are financed. And and lots of, I follow this stuff in the news of you guys, so I kind of feel like I got a good feel, but I've never even been in a resident-owned community, one of yours or another one. So I'm a little ignorant of what it's like.
Great. Well, we've got a terrific one just north of you there in Liberty, Missouri. Longtime owner who wanted to sell to the homeowners, and we began working with them.
Which one is that, if you can say?
It's Liberty Landing.
I know that one. Yeah, I think I tried to buy that. I think I'm remembering this.
I'm not surprised. A lot of people did.
It's a nice park. Yeah.
It's a very nice park. I met the community owner about a decade ago at an MHI trade show. And so she's had in her mind for some time wanting to sell the community to the homeowners. And it was the right time in 2021 for her to do that. And we completed that transaction with her and the co-op in December. So we're happy to get you up there that'd be wonderful.
Yeah.
What boiled down, essentially what the homeowners are doing in these co-op cases is forming a corporation, a cooperative corporation, maybe a membership nonprofit in some states, but regardless, it's a corporation that's owned by the homeowners on a one member, one share basis. So every owner occupied home can buy a single share and have one vote in the co-op's activities. And essentially the residence corporation is buying the land from the commercial investor, the seller, and in a very, for the seller, a typical transaction. It's a sale from one community owner to another. All the same due diligence, all the same financing activities taking place in that process, and simply the co-op is taking ownership of the land. Our piece of that is twofold. One, helping the homeowners form that co-op. Obviously, they engage local counsel to represent their corporation, but we help them through the process of putting that together, putting the membership together, educating the membership, helping that organization prepare for taking ownership. And then we also facilitate and help them through the due diligence process, leveraging, engineering support, appraisals, and legal counsel. That's on the organizational development side. And then we provide financing to these co-op corporations. So we're able to provide the financing that gets the deal closed. And that. So
the financing for the debt for the acquisition.
Exactly.
So I'm curious, how are you guys able to do that? Just from your own investor pool, or are you guys are originating loans and introducing them to Fannie Mae or to Bank of America or someone else to make a loan?
Happens both ways. Our objective is to bring the best possible financing for that resident-owned community to the table. So we have a national organization called ROC USA Capital, and that is a community development financial institution. It's actually certified by the U.S. Department of Treasury for the purpose of providing financing in low-income communities. And our mission is solely focused on financing resident-owned communities. So it's a CDFI. There are 1,400 CDFIs in the country.
I'm familiar with them. Because it's new markets tax credits related to those, and a lot of them in Kansas City. There's one that I know the guy that runs it. So yeah, I'm familiar. So okay, so you have a financial arm that is a government approved entity, and you have a certain requirement that obviously is in line with your mission, and it's financing for low income communities.
Exactly. Yep. And so we're able to show up. And the value proposition to the community owner, the seller, the investor is, they can sell to the homeowners. There's expert assistance through the process, and there's readily available financing. And that was really the significant innovation that we began scaling in 2008. Resident ownership around the country did exist, in Florida, California, smattering of places, but no one had tried to scale it. And no one had previously organized the capital in advance of individual transactions. So
Got it.
we organize the financial institution so that the capital is readily available. And that's why we're helping co-ops close on their communities in standard commercial timeframes, 90 to 120 days. Because we recognize most community owners aren't interested in what had been the history of this, in some states taking 6 months to a year or longer for the homeowners to secure financing. Because when you're out chasing around for banks, et cetera, it takes a lot of time. So we organize that capital all up front and have it readily available.
That's good. Now that's definitely helpful, because that was the knock I heard on selling to the residents was what if they don't get financed and it's slower and all that kind of stuff. So if it's not the case with you guys, that's awesome. What about the equity? If I'm thinking if a standard transaction is 25% equity, who's putting that up? Is you guys getting 100% finance, or is there some sort of charitable grant? You have investors, or because presumably in a lot of communities, residents aren't ready to pony their money together and put up 25% down, or are they?
They're not. And we specifically work in low income communities. The majority of mobile home parks in the country are occupied largely by low income families and households. So that's no surprise to any of your listeners. No, we're showing up with 110% LTV debt financing, Ferd.
Wow.
Not available to you.
Yeah.
So
okay, give me your phone number. We're gonna do more business than I thought.
So in effect, we're providing fixed rate debt in what would be the equity tranche for your typical, acquisition. And we do that because our purpose is to help low income homeowners buy the land under their homes and secure that as an affordable community. And obviously the capital that we're raising, from banks and foundations, insurance companies and the like, is for that social and economic purpose, right? To help low income people gain security. So, remarkably, that has been incredibly successful. We have not had any co-ops default on that. We've not had any co-ops resell their communities back to the market. Now, your listeners will be savvy enough to know that there have been co-ops that have sold back to commercial owners. In Florida, that's happened. It's happening right now. But those are market rate co-ops versus these limited equity co-ops that we're forming. So this is a little bit down into the weeds, but in a market rate co-op, it's the scenario you alluded to. Each member comes up with 25%. The membership comes up with 25% equity through the sale of shares, and those shares are $10 or $20 or $50,000 a piece. And what's happening, of course, is those shares have appreciated as the community's appreciated, and so there's now some incentive to sell those properties. Limited equity co-ops, membership shares cost $250, $500, and they don't appreciate. And they don't get, there's no profit motive to sell the land in limited equity co-ops. So that's why you see these are secured long-term as affordable communities. Homes still sell in the marketplace for what people would sell as fair market value, but the land is secure long-term. And that's really the purpose here. Let's have secure long-term communities, because we're going to need these on a go-forward basis, right? We need.
Yeah, I mean, looking from the outside, tell me if this is accurate as to what part of your mission is, but I see it, and I think part of the mission of your organization is to make sure that the low-income people that live in the communities don't get priced out by new private equity guys buying the park and jacking the rent up.
You got it. Number one fear of homeowners is escalating rents. So they're highly motivated to gain security to avoid that. The other risk that, of course, they walk around with a pit in their stomachs is community closure, redevelopment. At this stage of the game, homeowners know those risks. They've seen enough of it over the years. The group in Liberty, Missouri, talked about their motivation for purchasing their property was a result of seeing some aggressive buyers purchasing other communities in their area. And so when they had the opportunity, they jumped on it.
Right. So I'm curious, how does lot rent work after the ROC, after ROC buys it, or through the group buys it? And presumably they're still paying, quote, HOA dues in order to maintain the property and service the debt. Is there something like inflation adjusted rent increases, or is it fixed forever, or does the board determine that? Because if I can see this as a defensive move of the residents, like, look, we don't want the rents to double, so let's agree to buy it ourselves, and we'll just do 6% a year, and we control our own destiny. But it's not a free lunch where we just, cool, now we own it. We never have to write a check again.
Yeah, no free lunches. You're absolutely right. But they increase their site fees based on increasing costs. So if property taxes rise or trash increases, and so those are set by the membership in their annual budgeting process, to be specific. So as costs rise, they raise their site fees. What we've documented is co-ops in ROC USA Capital's portfolio, because that's where we have the best data. They're increasing their site fees at just under 1% per year on average. And latest that I've read on the industry side is annual increases of about 3.9% nationally for site fee increases.
Those both are lower than what I would have guessed.
Yeah, I know with great confidence that the co-op site fee increase is 0.9%. I read various things on the industry side, but that's the MHI stat on that and I think it's rooted in data comp data. So
okay, no, it's probably, I don't know of a better source.
I don't either.
MHI/data comp for that. It just feels light, 3.9. Frankly, in places like Oregon where there's rent control, I think you're allowed 7% on top of inflation. So it's like even in rent control areas, rents are going up more than 3.9%.
Right. Right.
Interesting. I think I have an idea that I just thought of that could potentially be self-serving for me and other community owners, but I think would definitely be potentially be beneficial to your guys' group. You mentioned property taxes going up. I think the biggest expense in mobile home parks, generally, it depends on the park. It could be management if you need a full-time manager, but in general, it's water, sewer, if you don't have the residents paying it. And the other one, and the biggest unknown when you acquire, is property taxes. Mm-hmm. It depends on the state, obviously, but if you're buying a deal, I'm actually doing a tax appeal this morning on one of our parks. You buy a deal for $1 million, it's on the books for 200,000, it might be reappraised at $1 million, and that's going to really kick your budget in the stomach if you didn't budget it, and or when your valuation, let's say your taxes go up by $10,000 at a 10 cap, it's $100,000 in valuation. At a 5 cap, it's $200,000 in valuation. Immediate kick in the stomach. That's something that I probably understand better than your resident-owned residents. Obviously, you guys will have seen that and have people help supervise and educate them on that. What I just thought of, I used to be a county appraiser, and in Missouri, there are three classifications of real estate: residential, commercial, and agricultural. And the assessment ratio is 19, 12, and 32, meaning the commercial people pay almost 3 times. For $1 million farm, you pay about a third of what you pay for $1 million commercial building. And that was the Missouri legislature way back when, and maybe in the Constitution of Missouri, way back when, determined that we like farmers. Farmers farm half the year. They were legislators that are half the year. They made laws that were farmer friendly. It's possible that there's a legislature out there, perhaps in Connecticut, that is low-income resident friendly, and you could lobby them to create a new classification for tax appraisal for manufactured housing communities. And if you were able to do that, that would be helpful for you and me. It's possible you could also do it for manufactured housing communities owned by the residents, which is probably an easier pitch to your legislature. But there's so many, I used to work in government for 5 years too. There are so many programs to help people. Some of them are like legitimate. Some of them are just somebody got to go to the ribbon cutting and get the credit for it. I don't know which one this would fall into in the local legislature, but I could see you pulling that off. Is getting a different, if not a different assessment ratio, some form of other, like with Fannie Mae. I did 3 Fannie Mae refis last year on my parks, and I agreed to the tenant site lease protections on all three because, among other things, I got a better interest rate, and they gave me, I think it was up to 15,000 of my third-party reports reimbursed. So I got an extra 15 grand 3 times. And the government gave me that as an inducement for me to be nicer to residents and give them these tenant site lease protections.
That's right.
Starting in 2022, I think they're required across the board. You don't have the discretion, but I chose to do them anyway. So with that type of thing in mind, it might behoove you to look for a government grant program. Maybe you've already thought of this, and because you're a CDFI, you automatically have credibility, as opposed to me going to some legislature. You're like, this is our mission, and presumably you're going to have a case study. You said thus far nobody's defaulted, but the first time you default is when Liberty Landing's property taxes are reappraised at 50,000 higher, and now your residents are choking on it.
Well, that's right. The thing, and I can't say this hasn't happened because the co-ops themselves, think of a 300 home community here. That's a lot of voters in that town. And so we absolutely have had co-ops that have shown up at town meeting or select board meetings and argued their case. I can't cite a tax assessment, writ large change in policy, but there's a lot of sensitivity to 400 voters in a community.
Right.
We have co-ops. We have co-ops in Halifax, Massachusetts. The co-op represents about 50% of the town's voters, I think.
Wow.
So yeah, so they've got some political sway that you wouldn't as an individual owner investor, right? So that definitely has its various implications, I would say.
All right, cool. Well,
yeah.
Sorry, I got us on a tangent, but something I thought of. So anyway, you're telling me, I think you've given me a good explanation of, I think, the cost structure for the residents, the process, the benefit to the residents. I think it's pretty clear. Tell me how you guys, in this case in Liberty, you spoke to the seller, this woman. How do you normally initiate these? If I have a community here in Kansas City, do you come to me? Do you go to my residents? What's the impetus for this? And then is the value proposition to me as the seller that I get to be nice and sell to my residents, or are you guys paying market price or even perhaps over market price? And then I'm also curious, because depending on that answer, what's the minimums? Would you guys do a 20 pad park, or do you need to be at 100, or you need to be at 200? And then what is your guys' role after the grave, or if you will, after the closing, to know that my residents don't run the place into the ground?
Great. All great questions, Ferd. So first off, we start with the community owner. No property is acquired if there's not a willing seller who's interested in selling at this point in time to this particular buyer. So we're not organizing homeowners. We're not stepping into communities without the community owner's permission and without agreement about what the price, terms, and conditions of a possible sale to the residents is. So that's why you see us at trade shows. That's why we know people like you in the business. And it really is a upfront assessment. Is this a good candidate for resident ownership? To your question about size, it really varies by market. We have a couple of different ways we do this. We have a network of nonprofit affiliates in some states. Some of them would undertake a 20-site community if it was close to their office, just outside of Olympia, Washington, or outside of Portland, Oregon, or outside of Missoula, Montana. And so there are places where that would be right. We also have a national team that goes in called our ROC USA Direct team. That's who supported the group up in Liberty. Liberty's 185 site community. But when we're bringing the national team in from a distance, and we've got people all over the country, we're looking for larger properties in that case. And that is a pretty good indication of some of the motivations. This is done at fair market value. I will never promote purchasing properties at a premium. But we're attuned to the market and very good at valuation. And so our purpose is to help co-ops acquire at market value on commercial timeframes. That's our commitment to the industry and to the homeowners. And it's how we will be successful over time, is really meeting seller expectations for sale. And yeah, for a lot of sellers, there's the added doing well by and doing good. The legacy, in case of the seller up in Liberty, that was a 40-year development by that family.
Right.
And they wanted to sell to the homeowners. She had it.
I remember this story now. I remember
you do.
Broker Bob was working on it. Right? Bob's like, she wants to sell to her residents. And at one point, I think I was going to buy half. And because I was like, let me buy half. You'll still own the park with me, but I'll do the work. And, it never didn't get very far. So
yeah,
you guys like you ruined it for me, but good for you and good for the residents. not that I would have been bad to the residents by any means. But,
no, and hey, look, man, there are a lot of good operators in the business. Absolutely. I've come to have a lot of friends in the business and come to respect a lot of business people in the business that really are providing affordable housing and secure, affordable home ownership around the country. But what everybody recognizes, there's a risk at the point of the transfer. And I had an operator about 6 months ago telling me he had sold to a colleague of his, somebody who had a lot of respect for, and the guy promised him that he would not raise the site fees beyond $100 over the first 2 years. And guy went right back on his word as soon as the deal closed. And he felt like he sold the homeowners down the path. That was a deal we were negotiating on. And actually he told me later, we were slightly north price-wise than his buddy. But because he had a relationship with the guy, he said, he took him at his word and sold him the deal, and won't do that again.
wow.
Yeah. So, it's at that point of transfer where the risks. I used to say back in the days when I was doing a lot of work in communities, homeowners, back in the day, it was black Cadillacs for whatever reason in this neck of the woods. When they started driving through the community, homeowners knew something was up. Yeah. I think the type of car changes over time, but
probably. I actually have a black Cadillac. I have a black Cadillac. I drive a truck normally, but my grandma, when she passed, I bought her black Cadillac from the estate so I can take it on road trips and stuff. Right now, I'm letting one of my managers use it because his car is not working, so he's using the Cadillac the last month or so. But I have a black Cadillac. It's old, but I'm too young to drive a Cadillac. But it's just it is what it is. Funny. Okay, so let's say I got a 100-space park. We both agree it's worth $5 million, and I say, all right, Paul, I'm willing to sell it to my residents for $5 million and through you guys. What next? When do you bring the residents in, and or what confidentiality do I have? What is your normal close rate? Because one of my fears would be my residents don't know that my park's worth $5 million. And once they find out it's worth $5 million, they're pissed and they don't want to pay me rent anymore. And maybe they want to buy the park, but if they don't close, do I now have a worse work-life balance because I got a bunch of frustrated residents?
Yeah, that's a very common fear. So, a lot of people have that in mind. The close rate is north of 95%. The two reasons why deals fall apart: one, misrepresented financials, and particularly misrepresented receivables. Sloppy bookkeeping, bad bookkeeping that just doesn't stand up when you get through it. Your initial assessment based on what you provided, the thing papers out, but then you get into it and it all falls apart. So we've had that experience a couple of times. And then undisclosed significant infrastructure issues. We all know you have a good working understanding of what's underground in your communities. Let's just have a forthright conversation right up front. And let's knock those two big risks out of the water. So good financial assessment and good understanding of what's underground. We're still going to have the engineers come in and do a property conditions report. That's standard, but we can get out in front of big issues if we know them. Because otherwise, then it is a matter of putting a viable opportunity in front of the homeowners. And the other thing we're doing in that upfront confidential assessment with you is assessing the viability of this as a resident-owned community. And we're very good at this. We've been doing this for over 38 years. I have been at this for a long, long time personally. And so we're very good at understanding if what's a viable opportunity.
So
And
I'm curious on that one, what that looks like, that analysis. I mean, is it something as simple as a ratio of park-owned homes versus tenant-owned homes, or do you actually meet the people to assess, these people have the incomes, or is there any leaders? Is it crime statistics? Is it demographics of any sort? Market analysis, all the above? I'm just curious because I've agreed I want to sell it to my residents for $5 million. It's a fair price for me. I feel like I'm doing good because I'm protecting them from these big, mean private equity shops. All right, Paul, let's do it. But then you tell me my residents aren't good enough or not viable enough. How do you? It's a letdown for me. So
Yeah.
what is your analysis based on?
Yeah, it's a
And
variety.
Would you tell me that? Would you tell me that? Or would you just be like, sorry, Ferd, we're not interested? Or would you tell me like, look, you got X problem and we're not going to do it?
Right. It's in terms of individual resident underwriting, we are not underwriting individual residents on a credit basis. So
Right.
we're using rent collection data as the sort of underwriting criteria, if you will, for individual members. So obviously if receivables are through the roof, we've got a problem right up front. We're not going in, you're not going forward. Let's just be clear. But in terms of capabilities of the homeowners themselves, I have worked in very low income communities and moderate income communities. The capacity within communities is there. And we're very good at helping groups get formed and supporting them through the process if it's a viable opportunity. And that just comes back to the initial evaluation with the seller, make sure that there's good economics here, and what we're putting in front of the homeowners for them to ultimately decide makes good sense. And so in the case of, let's just say Missouri, that's our ROC USA direct team. That's Angela Romeo, who a lot of people in the business know. Angela's been at this for 10 years. She runs the estimate of value and runs through all the initial assessment of the community. One thing we do look at is, what are houses selling for in the community? If it's a community of $5,000 and $10,000 homes and significant challenges on the housing quality side, that's probably an indication of significant challenges to organize a co-op. There's a positive correlation between the value of the homes and people's motivation to buy the land. So the more valuable the homes, the higher the motivation to buy. But you can't bring your upper middle class mindset and economics to that. A $25,000 or $30,000 home to a low income family is a very valuable asset.
Sure.
And so there's a lot of motivation even at that price level.
Okay, no, that makes sense.
Yeah. And to your question about park owned versus owner occupied, resident ownership works when it's owner occupied. So we're looking for a high percentage of owner occupied homes. We do have some latitude on park owned, and recognize our strategy there is to convert those to owner occupied soon after the closing if they are included in the deal. What's
a high percentage in your mind then? Is it like
north
80%?
North of 75% owner occupied.
Okay.
We draw a hard line at 75%.
Got it.
Yeah.
What about vacant lots? Do you buy parks that are 60% occupied from a lot standpoint?
Yeah, 60's tough, for a whole host of reasons. And in the business today, not that many years ago, you've been at this long enough. Not that many years ago, you weren't paying for vacant sites. Nobody
Right.
was.
Right.
You're now paying for vacant sites. So no, co-ops are much better off with more highly occupied communities, 10%, 15% maybe, but for some infill, but not significant lifts, like a 40% lift. That's beyond the business model.
Got it. No, that's great stuff.
Yeah.
What other stuff are we missing, Paul, that we haven't covered on this? I feel like I've asked most of the questions that come off the top of my head.
Well, one thing a lot of sellers are curious about is, who pays for all the due diligence right up front? It's a group of low-income homeowners. How does that get done other than in a commercially reasonable time? So here again, this is not a product available to you, Ferd, but we provide a forgivable due diligence loan right up front. Our objective is for these homeowners to organize a co-op, have legal counsel, have access to all the standard due diligence so they can make an informed decision to purchase. But also we recognize we're working in the commercial market. So we provide a forgivable due diligence loan that's repaid if they go on to purchase the community. But if they were to choose not to, we write that off. And how often has that happened? I think our loss rate is like 3% on due diligence loans. And it's usually, as I indicated earlier, that property conditions report. Did we go into it with our eyes wide open, and did we know what we were going to find, or are we surprised and it blows the thing up?
Got it. Now, how do you guys get paid? Presumably you guys get management, you get some sort of asset management fees or commissions or interest for some of the loans you are in the middle of, or by being a virtue of CDI, do you have government funding of some form?
No, we are paid one at closing, a closing fee to support the transaction. And then it's through interest earnings on the financing that we generate our ongoing earnings. That interest earnings also pays not just for the financing, but also for ongoing training and education, access to our leadership program and our leadership institute. We're highly focused on helping co-op boards and members get the leadership development that they need. It's the same as what you would provide in your firm, how you're providing ongoing staff development opportunities, right? And so we're very, we spend the bulk of the resources here at ROC USA on ongoing training and education. That's where the biggest piece of our budget goes.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
Good that you guys do.
Yeah, because you want people to be successful. I'm a big believer. You do not work and help low-income people purchase their communities if you're not committed and sufficiently funded to stand shoulder to shoulder with them for forevermore. This is a long-term partnership.
Yeah. So then the last kind of step in the process is after you talk to me, you do the due diligence with the community residents. They then take some sort of vote, and then if they get to vote, somebody is the HOA president and signs the loan docs, or signs the closing docs.
Oh yeah, it's pretty fun. Got great quotes and pictures and videos of this. You're talking about, Debbie Winowitz down in Halifax, Massachusetts, former police dispatcher. She has signed a $29 million mortgage.
That's awesome.
Pretty remarkable.
That's funny. All right, man. Cool. What else? Anything else you wanted to share before we jump, Paul? Any other last comments? And if not, or let us know where we can find you as well, so people can reach out to you.
Yeah, people can reach us on rocusa.org. It's rocusa.org, no hyphen, and it is a .org, not a .com. Feel free to reach out. Angela Romeo is a national contact a lot of people know. And of course, people can always reach me. Everybody at ROC USA is first initial, last name, no period or anything, and at rocusa.org. But feel free to reach out. We can put that out in any manner. And we have a lot of conversations with community owners, and it's all done on a confidential basis. Even if it's something you're thinking about or curious about for years down the road, we've got long memories, and we're patient. We're patient people. So if anyone's interested or curious, happy to talk to anybody.
All right, sounds good, Paul. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Ferd. Appreciate the time.
You've been listening to the Mobile Home Park Lawyer Podcast with Ferd Neiman. Ready to learn more? Go to www.themobilehomelawyer.com for free resources and materials to help you succeed. If you love the podcast, go to Apple Podcasts, give us your review, and subscribe today. Thank you for listening. Neither the Supreme Court of Missouri nor the Missouri Bar reviews nor approves certifying organizations or specialist designations. The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely upon advertisements.